Om Shri Sai Ram, my loving obeisance at the divine lotus feet of Bhagwan. Respected elders, dear sisters, greetings to all of you on International Women's Day. The theme for this year's celebration is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Honestly, I'm never sure if 8th of March is a celebration or a solemn observance. But I'm grateful that I was welcomed to be part of this culture class. I am a bit miffed that I get to address only about 500 women at the Anantapur campus and not the men of the other campuses. Because I have come to believe that conversations around gender justice can happen only at a round table where every gender has a seat. I'm tired of hearing all the things girls have to be taught and women should do. I'm waiting to hear what men should do and boys should be taught. Dear students, I am also very mindful of what a privilege it is to address young adults such as you. All of you will shape what our collective future looks like. As scientists, academicians, policymakers, authors, teachers, and parents of the future, each of you will have a rather choiceless task of practicing gender justice in your lives. I wish to share my imperfect ways of practicing gender justice, both in personal and professional spheres. My affair with gender justice is more than a decade old. It began with my postgraduate dissertation in women's studies, followed by an MPhil and a PhD in it. At various points during the research, I received direct and indirect guidance from Bhagwan, very specifically on my research topic. But I'm going to reserve those experiences for another occasion. At every point during my academic research in women's studies, I thought I knew all about gender justice, women's rights, and women's identity. How foolish and naive I was. My own challenge with gender justice began in July 2017 when I faced gender-based violence in what I thought was an extremely safe environment. All my theoretical knowledge and even a PhD in gender crumbled at that moment. I spent the next 2 years focused on healing my PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And in the last 2 years, I have taken great efforts to bridge the gaps of theory and practice of gender justice in my life. So far, it has been the most empowering, yet most vulnerable and humbling experience of my life. In the coming few minutes, I want to share with you some key lessons I have learned through this. Let me try and present those in a framework you will remember easily. The model of 5 human values that Bhagwan held as dear as the Pancha Pranas. Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa. Satya. Speak your truth. Break stereotypes. Be yourself unabashedly, unapologetically. Never ever forget the truth that you are a divine being having a human experience. Do not be reduced into convenient roles and models others want you to be. Find ways to let that divine light from within shine through. Bhagwan used to distinguish between Nijam or facts and Satyam or truth. But for convenience's sake, I'm going to club both these. So I want you to remember the truth, the fact that this society that you live in has been made by men. There is gender injustice in design and data. The cars you drive, the safety measures in it have been done with men in mind. Men as producers, men as consumers. And that is the reason most women drivers who face terrible accidents are often paralyzed shoulder down, even though the number of women who drive is relatively few and the ones who get into accidents are even fewer. This is just one example. Most drug dosages are decided on the basis of male body weight and male endocrine systems. Even the symptoms of diseases that are taught in medical schools are based on how men experience it. For instance, if I ask you, what are the symptoms of a heart attack or myocardial contraction, most of you would say chest pain, left upper backache. True, but partially true. The reason heart attacks go undiagnosed in women far often is because the symptoms are discomfort in upper abdomen, shortness of breath, nausea, sweating, or fatigue. These are just some very common examples of how systemic negligence of gender justice can have fatal consequences. I can spend a whole day with you all showing you how this key issue appears in data architecture, law enforcement, finance, or even the toiletries you use. But what I'm trying to say with so many examples and so many words is please be aware that this is a man's world. And irrespective of who you are, student, researcher, janitor, teacher, administrator, there is much work to be done to make the world kinder and more just. Which brings me to the next point, Satya Dharma. The definition of Dharma is Dharayati iti Dharma. That which supports and sustains is Dharma. So by definition, Dharma is sustainability. And Sanatana Dharma is perpetual, enduring sustainability. Earlier, I was talking to you about the fundamental flaws due to gender bias in the system. How do you rectify that? We can rectify that when we have more and more non-men in places of power. When we can integrate the lived experiences of women, trans, and other genders into science and technology, governance and law enforcement, teaching and public policy, when there is greater diversity, equity, inclusion. The one and only commonality we all have in this human existence is the divine essence in us and nothing much else. Human life is subjective. And the more we accommodate plurality and multiplicity of voices, the more we incorporate indigenous wisdom and support marginalized groups, we will slowly move towards sustainable future, towards Sanatana Dharma. That paves way to peace, Shanti, and Prema, love. We need communities of care and healing spaces that can come together for the victims and assist them in their journey to be survivors. We need trauma-informed leadership, leadership with trauma sensitivity. How many of us can really claim that we know how to deal with a shattered person who has been subjected to gender-based violence or domestic violence? Do we have the compassion to listen and handhold the victim by providing access to mental health services, access to law enforcement? Or do we sympathize or even worse, pity them? Do we resort to tell their tale without permission to others and reduce them to a case study or a statistic? And then there are those who chose to blame the victim with questions like, what were you wearing when you were abused? Why were you there at that time? Did you remember to take God's name when the situation happened? I have been asked these questions. I'm sure many of you have been too. These are all positively harmful responses, especially from people in positions of power. There are laws in this country that protect a female from womb to tomb. I agree that law enforcement bodies are themselves entrenched with gender injustice. But as young adults, I need each of you to take up the responsibility to educate yourself on ways to practice radical love and compassion. Please know that there are grievance redressal committees in every educational institution and professional institution you will be part of. Anti-discrimination cell, anti-ragging cell, committee for marginalized communities, internal complaints committee, the ICC or internal complaints committee of the organization, even at Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, are required to have student representatives on the panel in case of complaints associated with the prevention of sexual harassment. Currently, we are living through very interesting parts of next century's history textbooks. Imagine there would be essay type questions to write on COVID pandemic and public health breakdown, on a war between Russia and Ukraine, As an aside, my prayer these days is that may we live in uninteresting times, really, really boring times. Those years that history textbooks skip over because nothing really happened and everything was fine. But we are also seeing how during these times it is weapons of mass destruction and nuclear arms that are also averting a full-fledged Third World War. Sometimes you need extremely powerful weapons to ensure that there is no violence. And for you to practice ahimsa in gender justice, I need you to equip yourself with a sterling character and deeply ingrained human values. Please arm yourself with education and skills. Please acquire financial independence. Master the art of saying no. No, remember, is a complete sentence. Learn about consent. Never put up with violence. Seek help. Learn to protect yourself. Be aware of the laws of the land that offer you protection. Enough of silence. Silence only benefits the abuser and never the victim. As the late Desmond Tutu, the apostle of love in our times, used to say, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Please learn to make noise and occupy as much space as you require. Please demand justice for yourself and for others. That is my message and appeal to you on this International Women's Day. Figure out how to practice human values in action, not talk. What does Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa look like to you in your personal lives, in your professional lives? Never ever let yourself forget that you're Bhagwan's precious property. Do not allow anyone to abuse you. We, Swami and I, have great expectations from you. You need to take care of yourself because you belong to him. Can you do that? Can you be the change that you want to see in the world? Best wishes and Sai Ram.